What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a tutorial on press to handstands. Very excited to do this tutorial. I know it's been highly requested. So we're going to be going through a proper warm up, some favorite drills that I have, as well as just going through a proper cool down as well. Now in terms of press to handstands, we will need a little bit of equipment. So P-bars, a band, or dumbbells depending, just as long as they're equal heights, as well as an empty wall space, because the wall is going to be one of our best friends when learning a press to handstand. Now another key thing, a prerequisite in order to get your press to handstand, I want you to be able to hold around a 5-second regular handstand. This is just because a lot of the drills require a negative press down, in which case you would have to be able to hold a handstand. So if you guys like this video and want another tutorial, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and let's get started. Starting off first, we do want to do a proper warm-up. So before I get into my wrist stretches, I would have done around a 5-10 minute warm-up on any cardio machine or skipping, anything like that, just to kind of get our heart rate up and our blood pumping. So to start off, we're going to go into our wrists. This is going to be a very similar warm-up that we did for just our regular handstands. We're going to be rocking back and forth. One thing I do want to emphasize is that you definitely need a lot of wrist mobility for a press to handstand. It requires a lot of leaning forward into those wrists. So making sure we have that mobility. We're gonna turn our hands sideways, rock back and forth. Now a couple things to help solve wrist mobility issues. If you just don't have the mobility, you can definitely do any of the drills that we do today on P-bars. We will be working on them for specific drills, but in which case, sometimes you just need to do all of your drills on P-bars, which is totally fine. Next, we're just gonna roll our wrists, our favorite, our milkshakes, and our roller coasters. Each of our warm-up exercises, we want to go through for around either 8 to 10 reps or 15 to 30 seconds just to sit in the stretches. So finishing off here, we're gonna then warm up our hamstrings, because that's another huge part of a press to handstand. A lot of people lack mobility in their hamstrings, which makes their straddle very small, which makes a press to handstand much harder. A straddle press to handstand is quite easy or easier with better mobility, because again, this position as a pike is a little bit harder to achieve rather than getting a nice open straddle. So we want to have flexibility on adductors and our glutes as well as our hamstrings. So sitting in our straddle stretch, we're going to reach forward as far as possible. So this position here, what I want you to imagine, if you are flat to the ground, this is absolutely perfect. Right here, this would be, imagine my hands are on the floor, I'm inverted. This is a perfect straddle compression. So that's why we practice this stretch. We're going to hold here for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We're gonna come up, we're gonna do the same thing, but now we're gonna do it standing. So I'll turn sideways right here. We're gonna come down. Ideally, what I wanna see is elbows to the floor, so that way we know we're nice and compressed against our legs. However, if you're starting up here, that's totally fine. We'll just gradually work our way down. So holding each stretch again for 15 to 30 seconds, depending on how much time you have to warm up or how stiff you're feeling. Stretching should never feel painful. It should just feel like slight tension. There should never be any sharp pain. We're gonna come down into a nice deep squat. We're gonna push our legs out, because again, we're trying to get those adductors. Pushing our legs out, getting a nice split right here. So if you're someone who's struggling with their middle splits, this is also another great stretch to do. Sitting here, holding for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now another area that we wanna focus on is also our lats. One of the biggest things in press to handstands is we have to really push up and activate through our lats. We definitely want a lot of overhead mobility. So one of my favorite stretches is just to do a child's pose. So separating our knees just a little bit, reaching forward and holding. Now because this is a tutorial, I'm not going through every single stretch. So these 3 mobility exercises aren't just the ones you need to be doing. You need to be doing much more. But for today's tutorial, these are my 3 favorites for each of the parts of the body that we want to focus on. We're gonna be stretching here. We're gonna walk our hands to the right, stretching out our left lat the most, holding there, again, 15, 30 seconds. Good. And then moving over to the left, again, stretching out that right side, holding it there. And good. So again, this mobility routine for the tutorial is only 3 exercises or 3 to 5 exercises. For a full mobility warm routine, that can be found on my app. But for today's tutorial, I just wanted to go over some of my favorites. Next, we're gonna go over some of my favorite drills. For the exercises, you will need a resistance band for some of them. I'm using just a light red band. However, depending on your level, you might need a thicker, more resistance band and then slowly work your way down. So you wanna get a nice high bar so you can anchor it. So we're gonna be throwing it over, just like that. And then you wanna loop it through, and then you wanna pull it, so that way it's just hanging. So we're gonna come back to this later, but this is how you set it up. First, we're gonna start with some floor drills. So I'm gonna move my P-bars over. We're gonna be starting with straddle press walks. So these would typically travel forward, but for the tutorial, we're just gonna kind of rock back and forth. We're gonna be here, we're gonna rock forward, lean off the toes, and then place. And then you would typically step and keep going, but I just wanna explain this one a little bit more in slow-mo. So we're not jumping to our hands. We wanna make sure that we have the weight into the top of our fingertips, peeling, leaning, and as soon as we feel like we can't hold it any longer off the tips of our toes, that's when they come in front of us. Now, as you can see, I'm relatively compressed here, which is another big reason why our hamstring mobility and flexibility is so important. And again, those wrists are being pushed forwards. Major things that I want you to focus on here is imagining someone has a string attached to like your low tailbone right here, is pulling you up, and that someone's tucking in your tummy here. So you wanna think belly button into your spine and then up into your rib cage. So sucking in, up, pulling your bum up to the sky, and then placing. As we move through this, we never wanna bend our elbows. We wanna make sure they stay nice and straight. From a forwards view, my hands are just shoulder width apart, coming up, weight in, and then down. We don't want our hands too wide or too narrow, because similar to working our handstands, that's gonna make the skill a lot harder. We just want it shoulder width apart. That's optimal for that lat activation as well. So that's exercise number 1, just on the floor, very simple. Exercise number 2, we're gonna grab our P-bars. So for my P-bars, I just have the mini bars from Base Blocks. But again, like I said, if you don't have this piece of equipment, you can definitely use any P-bar variation, or even 2 dumbbells that are the same height, or 2 benches that are the same height. So grabbing our P-bars, this is a good grip. So again, someone who has bad wrist mobility, this is going to be perfect right here. So it's stacked rather than flexion. So whenever hands stacked, we're gonna come into the middle. We're gonna work our core muscles. So this is another big important part of a stalder press or a press to handstand is our core. We're just gonna hold a V-sit for around 15 to 20 seconds. Now, depending on your level, 5 seconds to 10 is totally fine. So having our hands here, shoulder width apart, pushing our shoulders away from our ears, starting into a tuck, and then extending out nice and straight. So ideally, we're not sunk into our shoulders and inactive. We want active right through there, nice pointed toes. You're gonna notice you shake a bit, but that's totally fine. You always feel so silly. Holding here, let's go for another 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So that's another one of my favorite drills, just because again, it's building that foundational core strength that you're gonna need for your press to handstand, and you can always play around with this drill in terms of tuck, pike, or straddle. What a straddle is gonna look like is we're gonna have our feet next to us, we're gonna bend our knees, and then extend out nice and straight. That's what a straddle would look like. And then a tuck, which would be the modification, would be just keeping our knees tucked into our chest. Now, depending what level you are or what press you're working on, this video is for straddle press, but if you're doing a pike press, an L-sit hold would be great, because again, it's just gonna help with that core strength. Now, moving on to our drill, we're gonna be going over to our band. This is my 3rd favorite drill. So this one's kind of awkward to get into. We're gonna wrap the band behind us, bring it in front, and this is where some mobility is required. We have to bring our leg in front and then loop it around, so that way it pulls up on our hips and does a lot of the work for us. I'm gonna move these out of the way. What I wanna see here is that same straddle like press walk position, but instead we're gonna go all the way into a straddle sit. So our hands are here, we're gonna peel up off the ground, lean, and instead of just placing our feet, we're gonna let them scoop all the way through and then sit into a straddle sit. Now the band helps kind of roll you back up naturally. Now depending on your level, it might be a little bit more uncomfortable, or it might just not happen quite quickly. So in which case what your reset would look like would be you go into the skill, you come down, you either sit flat on your bum, you'd come almost like into a squat and then reset. So again, really quickly, some key things. Nice straight arms, leaning forward, letting your toes peel off, sitting down into a straddle, and then resetting for your next rep. Now to come out of it, grab the band, pull down, and then loop it, and then come on out. So the band for straddle press or staller press is gonna be one of your best friends because it just helps so much with that initial just like tucking your bum up position for your straddle and staller press to handstands. So those are 3 of my favorite drills. Again, if you want a full program, definitely check out my app. We have a full 4-phase program for your staller press to handstand. Moving on to our cool down, we are gonna incorporate a little bit of core exercise as well as just a little bit of mobility. So the first one we're gonna start with is just our hollow body rocker up into our straddle. So this one is probably one of my favorites and that I show across the board. You've probably seen it on my Instagram as well. We're gonna be rocking back into a hollow body, coming up into a straddle. Ideally, what I would love to see is a slight lift off of the bum and then coming back down. This one for reps, you wanna hit around 8 to 10. So that hollow body coming up, lifting the bum, and then back down. So nice straight arms and legs, up and down, just like that. Now, for this drill, one of the most important things here is that our legs and our arms are staying nice and straight. Even though we're not putting any weight into either of those body parts, just making sure that there's tension through our legs and through our arms is gonna eventually transition into our press to handstand very nicely. If you're just practicing loose conditioning, your overall skill is gonna look loose and sloppy and it's gonna be a lot harder to achieve. So that's one core exercise. The other one that I love that's gonna help our hip flexors, open my legs back into a straddle, hands down, we're gonna be lifting our toes into a straddle leg raise. So coming up just like this. Now, this one, if it is a little bit harder, you can just focus one leg at a time, or you can even put one hand behind, one hand in front, and then lean back and lift. Now, if you wanna make it a little bit harder, the further out we reach, the harder it's gonna be. So if my hands are in nice and close, you'll notice my legs can go super high. If I bring them out to ankle length, it's a little harder for me to lift, which is gonna make this exercise a little bit harder for me to do, which is a good progression for me since I'm a little bit more advanced. Again, regression is just here or just on one leg. Now, moving over to the wall, which is one of my favorite exercises, I'm gonna come over here, and again, this is more of a mobility one. We're just gonna be in a nice straddle stretch, legs nice and flat. Again, we're forcing that stretch into the wall, elbows down, and holding. This is good compression because it's forcing you to maintain your straddle and you're not pushing back. And you can hold it right there, heels flat against the wall. And again, holding for around 15 to 30 seconds. Again, if you need to be up here, that's totally fine. Eventually progress to your elbows. Now we're gonna turn to the wall. This one's a really good one again for stretching. We're gonna put our legs nice and flat so that way we're gonna V-sit. And we can hold this passively where we're not really engaging our core and just stretching out our hamstrings, or we can force our bum off the ground and then hold a V-sit, which again is gonna help with our core, our straight arm strength, as well as our flexibility. This one, because it's a little bit harder, try to hold for 10 to 15 seconds and then let yourself come down and then just turn out to exit. Lastly, what I want to touch on is a little bit more mobility. This one's going to be a little bit more active again. This one's for our hips because a lot of people have tight hips, which is what restricts them from going into their straddle. So we're just going to go into our 90-90 openers. So this is for someone who's very beginner, again, can't really get into that straddle position very well. Starting facing here, rotating, and then turning. So ideally, I want you to be able to do this without your hands. However, if you're very stiff in your hips, using your hands to help you maneuver all the way through. Just coming through like that. This one you want to do the rep range around like 8 to 10. Coming through and then back. So that's a great way to cool down your body after doing your press to handstand conditioning, just doing a little bit of core exercise as well as a little bit of mobility. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you guys want a full program, definitely check out my app. There will be a full press to handstand program launching in September. I'm super excited for it. There's follow along tutorials as well as actual just the program itself. And so hopefully you guys check it out. If you do, comment below, and I'll see you guys next time.